so great to see such a good turnout. We're so happy to have you here, and I welcome everybody that is watching us on the live stream video, which is this little thing over there that's so cute. This event will be recorded and it will be put on the library's website. My name is Linda Lancaster, and I'm the group lead for the South Shore and Cape chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm also a member of the Plymouth Area League of Women Voters Sustainability Committee. And I wish to thank the sponsors of this event, which are the Plymouth Library for this wonderful facility, the South Shore and Cape Citizens Climate Lobby chapter, which is my group, Plymouth Area League of Women Voters, and Sustainable Plymouth. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization whose goal is to empower citizens to shape better communities. Sustainable Plymouth is a group of environmentally conscious volunteers living in the Plymouth area that focuses on several areas of environmental sustainability. There's information about Sustainable Plymouth and the Climate Lobby on the tables behind you. Feel free to sign in on the Sustainable Plymouth sheet, take in your materials. The Citizens Climate Lobby, if you haven't heard of us before, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, all-volunteer organization with national reach. We have over 200,000 members nationwide, and we meet with every single congressional district in the country at least twice a year. So we have conversations with our elected officials on a regular basis. We're all trying to push for strong legislation that will significantly reduce heat-trapping air pollution. We do this by building on our values of respect for differing views and finding common ground between conservatives and liberals. We're very glad that the Federal Inflation Reduction Act passed last year, as well as the Infrastructure and the CHIPS Act. All of these bills included clean energy provisions. Although we know more is needed to reach our state and national goals, these bills are a big step forward towards cleaner air, better health, and a greener economy. The state of Massachusetts also passed legislation last year to help homeowners afford to upgrade to heat pumps, and we'll hear about that in just a moment. These bills offer many incentives. In fact, so many incentives it's sometimes hard to keep track of them all. But a bill is only as good as its adoption, which means people like us actually taking advantage of the rebates and tax credits in the bills. So we're here tonight to help homeowners understand the ways the government will help pay for your home improvements, like heat pumps, and how you can access those incentives. This is the second of a three-part series of workshops. Our third session is about a month from tonight. It's on July 25th at 7 p.m., and that will focus on solar panels and battery storage for your home. So just to get some information about you out there, how many of you have heard of Mass Save or the Inflation Reduction Act? Great, excellent. How many have had a free home energy audit? Good, good. We have forms. If you haven't had an energy audit and you're interested in one, there's some forms on that table back there that you can take with numbers to call and get that scheduled. Who is thinking about installing a heat pump in your home? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You're in the right place. So we're so pleased to have Loie Hayes, who is the Energy Efficiency Coordinator at the Green Energy Consumer Alliance, as our speaker tonight. The Green Energy Consumer Alliance is a 41-year-old nonprofit based in Boston and Providence that serves Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Their mission is to harness the power of consumers and communities to speed the transition to zero emissions. It fulfills this mission by offering consumers several programs they can tap into, and by lobbying for clean energy policies at the state level. The handout on your chair is a really nice summary that they put together for you. And our speaker, Loie, has worked at the Consumer Alliance since 2013. And previously, before that, she worked in book and newspaper publishing for 20 years. She's been organizing on climate issues since 2005 in a variety of capacities. She led energy conservation workshops in many of Boston's neighborhoods as the coordinator of the Boston Climate Action Network and for Renew Boston. She served on the City of Boston's Community Advisory Committee on Climate Action and on the board of the Boston Climate Action Network. So after Loie's presentation, we're going to have Dale Bryan, who's a Plymouth resident. He is going to talk a little bit about his experience installing a heat pump on his older home. So Loie will have the floor first, and then Dale will come up. At the very end, we'll have questions, so I ask you to please hold your questions to the end if you would. And after the questions, we'll have a drawing for our door prize today, which is a $25 gift card for Morrison's Garden Center. And if you haven't put your name on a slip of paper, you can do that right in the back. Do that. So I'm happy to turn the floor over to Loie.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just start by admitting that I have a throat condition. It's not contagious. It does make me cough sometimes, so if I do go into a spasm, bear with me. I will get through it. I've got my water and my cough drops, but it hopefully will. So anyway, I need my pointer, my clicker. So as Linda says, yeah, I've been doing energy efficiency work for quite a while now, and focusing on heat pumps in the last couple of years. Because really, we know the climate crisis is happening, the water is coming and the heat is rising, and we have to do something about it, and that's stopping the burning of fossil fuels in our homes. So some basic introductions, and then how heat pumps work, what the costs are, what the incentives are, and design considerations. This is a really important thing that you don't want to forget, and Linda and I were talking before, and switching from fossil fuel heat to heat pumps is almost as huge as switching from horse transportation to automobiles. It really requires a different mindset, a different set of habits, etc., different infrastructure. So, green energy consumers. We are all about consumers, and that's why this is not a rah-rah heat pump, go out and get it right now presentation. This is a, what are they, and what are the considerations that you need to think about. As I said, it's a huge transition. We are here to help consumers find trusted vendors and sound advice. Hopefully what I'm going to say to you today is really trustable, and I'm not going to lead you out on a limb anywhere. And we do a lot of trying to move the industry by educating consumers so that they're asking good questions. And you can get more information on the website, greenenergyconsumers.org. A heat pump is really, in some ways, like a water pump. It is just moving something from one place to another. It's not creating water, it's not creating heat, it's just moving it from one place to another. And it does that through a refrigerant that it pumps from one place to another. It pumps from a warm place, sucks up the heat in the warm place, and then is pumped to the cold place and dumps the heat out. And it works both directions. So it's just like an air conditioner, it's just like a refrigerator. Those are both heat pumps that use refrigerant, but it works both directions. So it can be cool in summer and hot in winter. Now, it used to be that the only heat pumps on the market were not very efficient at low temperatures. But if somebody tells you, oh, I got a heat pump a decade ago and it doesn't keep my house warm enough, there are reasons for that, and there's new technology that works and will be effective. There are many, many people in Massachusetts, and even in much more northern climates, that rely on heat pumps for 100% of their heating load. They come in many varied forms. What you're looking at here is the ductless mini split, but there are ducted versions, and you can have a whole home heat pump, or you can have part of your home heated and cooled by a heat pump. And this one is an air source heat pump, where the air handler and where the compressor is above ground, but there are ground source ones, also called geothermal. I'm not going to speak a great deal about those, but those are very efficient and worth doing if you have the property that would be amenable to that. And the capital, they're more expensive. So honing in on the ductless, a couple different designs for the indoor units. You've probably seen these high on the wall units. That's the most common, it's easiest to install, but there are also floor mounted units. These are particularly effective on the first floor of a home, and the refrigerant line that connects the indoor unit and the outdoor unit can go through your basement, which means you can have one coming up in the middle of the house as opposed to these wall units, which are generally on an outside wall. And then there are some that you can put in through the ceiling cassette, but that would be in a house where you've got an attic where you can do work in the attic. Occasionally you can do one from below, but that's more rare. The outdoor condensers, they need to have space, they need to be up off the ground. If that were on the ground and it were the middle of the winter, it might get encrusted with ice, and the ice would prevent the air from flowing, and the air is what you need to have a heat exchange. So it has to be up, and it has to be, enough away from the house so that, there's not ice buildup between. And you can see the refrigerant line here that's going up the side of the house. That can be made, to match your decor, etc. If your house needs to be resided, you want to do the residing before you add the heat pump, because you'd have to take it all down and put it back up if you were doing it afterward. Why are we pushing heat pumps? Because of the climate crisis, because of greenhouse gases. This is a comparison of different heating sources from the Mass Clean Energy Center using the current electric grid. And you see the air source heat pump is, much cleaner than the electric baseboard. That's because it's so much more efficient than the electric baseboard, even though they're both drawing from the same grid. And then, of course, the oil, propane, natural gas are all dirtier. When you go to 100% clean electricity, which you can do now through our program, through probably your community aggregation, etc., you have zero emissions from your heating if you're heating with electric. This is why all those incentives are happening both on the federal and the state, and sometimes on the city level, because we have to do that. We can't survive as a civilization if we continue to burn oil, etc. So, what is the cost? So, let me caveat, very rough ballpark, every house is different, etc., etc. But if you were going to put in a single head ductless system, one outdoor condenser, one head inside, you'd be looking at roughly $6,000. Of course, you could get a very big one or a very small one, and they would be different prices, but rough ballpark. Then if you were replacing a centrally ducted system, you'd be looking at $15,000 to $25,000 or more. If you have a big house, if you have a big leaky house, it could be considerably bigger. Or if you want absolute same temperature in 8 bedrooms, then yes, that's going to add up. You can think of it as roughly comparable to replacing both a fossil fuel heating and an electric central air conditioning system. If you have both of those, then it definitely, would be cost competitive to replace them both with heat pumps, because you're replacing 2 systems with just one. You will need 200 amp service, most likely, but there are many incentives, including the heat loan, the 0% loan through Mass Save, which, if you're getting a heat pump, goes up to $50,000. So you can spread the cost of that heat pump out over 7 years with 0% interest. So the incentives from Mass Save are great if you are completely replacing your fossil fuel system with a heat pump, $10,000 right off the top. And that is regardless of the system size. So if you have a small house, you may come out very close to not much, not having to pay much. So that's a great opportunity. The fossil fuel system doesn't need to be taken out through the Mass Save program. I think if you're going through the low-income program, which also subsidizes heat pumps for some homes, then the heating system does need, the fossil fuel system does need to come out. If you are a moderate income household, and I don't have a slide to define that, but you're thinking roughly 60% of area median income to 80% of area median income. There's an extra $6,000 for the whole home systems. You do need to get the home energy assessment first, and when they do the home energy assessment, they say, oh, there's opportunities to add more insulation. You have to avail yourself of that opportunity before you can qualify for the whole home. Now, many people would like to not do a whole home. They have a relatively new fossil fuel system or some other reason. They want to keep that fossil fuel system for either part of their home or for the coldest part of the year as a backup for emergencies, something like that. And you can still get incentives for that. These are called partial systems, and it's a per ton of heating capacity rebate. You can think of 400 to 800 square feet as needing a ton of heating capacity. So you can think about how that might size out to your house. And you can get an integrated control. One more second. It's essentially a smart thermostat that can talk to both the heat pump and the fossil fuel system and can seamlessly toggle between them. Say it's programmed that the technician would program a specific turnover, a set point, say 30 degrees. It's 40 degrees, it's 39, it's 38, etc. Your heat pump is working just fine. It hits 30, and your thermostat says, time to switch. And it shuts down the heat pump and starts up your fossil fuel system. And likewise, as the temperatures rise the next day, it would turn that off and turn the heat pump back on. There are also ground source, as I mentioned, heat pumps, and there are very good incentives, $15,000 for a whole home ground source heat pump. They are more expensive, which is why the incentive is larger. They're also more efficient than an air source heat pump. So over the long term, your operating costs will be lower with a ground source. But you do need ground that can be dug in. You can't put it on ledge. And you need to have enough space to get essentially a well drill into the space. There are also air-to-water, also known as hydronic heat pumps. And there is an incentive for that. These are most applicable for radiant flooring because the temperature of the water that can be generated by an air-to-water heat pump is not as great as the temperature that your boiler spits out. And so unless you greatly improve the insulation of the home, you won't be able to keep the home warm enough with your existing radiators. Now, I do know of people, I've spoken to them, who have greatly increased the insulation of their home, and they have switched to a hydronic heat pump, and they are using just their existing radiators, and they are keeping the house totally cozy. So it's all about the heat load, and want to do that insulation as much as possible beforehand. Also, there are very few experienced installers on the hydronic heat pumps, so if you're committed to that, then you just need to plan a longer time scale for getting that in the queue. Just to touch on heat pump water heaters, if you currently heat your hot water, your domestic hot water, with your heating system, if you have a boiler with an indirect hot water tank, you'll need to replace, you'll need to get a new water heater. And I do recommend the heat pump water heater. They are more efficient than the electric resistance tanks. So if you currently have an electric resistance tank, definitely have it in your mind. The next hot water heater that I buy is going to be a heat pump water heater because it's so much more efficient. You do need the You do need the electrical wiring, you need adequate space. I've seen pictures of them in a utility closet, but generally you want like 750 square feet for one of the heat pump water heaters to, be able to find enough heat to keep your water hot. You do need a condensate drain because it's going to make the air drier and pull moisture out of the air. So it does make the space colder and drier. So if you have a finished basement, you need to think with the installer, how's this going to work, so that you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. And there is a good website on the Mass Clean Energy site, goclean.masscec.com. I highly recommend that site for all sorts of energy efficiency education materials, including a way to find installers. So now on to the incentives. Federal tax, from the federal tax, the Inflation Reduction Act. So the federal tax credit increased dramatically because of the Inflation Reduction Act. It used to be $300 a year, now it's $2,000, and you can have a new energy efficiency thing every year, where in the past, once you had taken an energy efficiency improvement for your home, you could never have one again. So this is great, and you can have it for all sorts of things, in addition to heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, electrical wiring upgrades, etc. And as I said, there's no lifetime cap now. You can stage out 10 years worth of home energy improvements and take a tax credit every year. Obviously, you have to have the tax liability to put that credit against. Now, you've heard about the federally funded rebates, and it's in your handout there, that there are federally funded rebates. But I will say it's November or later. And that's because the federal government passed all this wonderful objective and allocated funds, but there was no, federally standing program to immediately start doling it out. So they said to all the states, think up a program. How are you going to dole out this money? Who's going to qualify? What's their application process, etc. That's a process. It's happening, but the EPA predicts that November is the earliest that any of the states are going to be able to take applications for those federal rebates. And there are good funding, and you'll see details of that in your handout. I won't go into that in detail now because it's not live yet, and I don't want to leave people on. But basically, there are two programs. One is for all income levels, and it's based on the total amount of energy that will be saved by a project. The other is for incomes less than 150% of area median income. I know in the Metro Boston area, 150% of area median income is about $200,000. So that is going to be based on measures. Heat pump would be heat pump, water heater, electrical, different amounts of money for the different things, not an aggregate how much energy you're saving. So we'll look forward to hearing about that. You can subscribe to the blog on our website because as soon as we have anything, we're going to put it right up and put it out to emails and all things like that. And sharing it with people like Linda who will share it in her groups. So now the big question is, how much does it cost to operate? There's all that installation cost, and then there's the operating cost. And I want to be crystal clear. For some people, it is going to cost more than your current heating, and you want to know whether you're one of those people or not. And I'm going to try to help you think about that. So first, we're going to look at temperature. So there are a few things that affect the operating costs. Efficiency of the equipment, the temperature at which it's being operated, and the fuel cost. Now, this is a graph showing 10 years of heating season data from New England. And you see that the majority of our time, this is hours of the heating season, this is temperature, and you see lots of hours are in the 0 to 60 range. So most of our heating season, between October and April, is in that 30 to 60 range. And then about 20 to 30% of the time, we're below freezing, below 30. And this is important because the temperature can affect the efficiency of the heat pump. The heat pump has to work harder in colder temperatures. Now, we're talking about cold climate heat pumps, remember, not your average heat pump that might be providing your central air now. Maybe you have a heat pump that provides central air. That is not going to be adequate for working efficiently, because that, if it were producing your heat also, it would have a dramatic drop-off in its efficiency in this tail end of the coldest days. This one's a little busy, so let me walk you through it. The gray screen behind is your temperature hours, same data that we looked at before, that kind of gray check mark behind. Each of the colors relates to a fuel source. The top line is propane. I haven't even put electric resistance on this chart because it's so out of proportion. It shrinks the difference between the other lines. So propane most expensive, oil next most expensive. And then looking on this right side, you have the blue line, that's your natural gas. The orange line is your ground source heat pump, and the green line is your air source heat pump. And you see for this, 30 to 60 range, the ground source and the air source heat pump are both less expensive than the natural gas. But when you get over into the lower temperatures, the air source heat pump starts to struggle, becomes more expensive to operate. And that's where you need to figure out your specifics as much as possible to be able to predict if you're replacing natural gas with a heat pump. You need to figure out what are the parameters to figure out if mine is going to be efficient enough. This is with a low electric rate. You can see in the key 27 cents per kilowatt hour for the electric, and natural gas is at $2.20 per therm. So this is the Boston municipal electric rate this winter for 100% green is the choice that I happen to make for this data set. If you have a municipal aggregation, you may have even a lower. If you have your own solar panels, you may have even a lower solar rate. Now look at this, where you have a high electric rate. This was a National Grid, Western Mass, 49 cents per kilowatt hour this winter. You know how the war in Ukraine drove fossil fuel prices sky high, especially natural gas. So this is a crazy one. And you see natural gas even is less expensive than either of the heat pump options. So for people who had installed heat pumps a year ago, they had a really rude awakening this winter. And I don't want anybody to be in that situation without first knowing it in advance whether or not you can handle that kind of shock. Now, utility companies change their rates every 6 months. Nobody can predict what the price of electricity, natural gas, oil, etc. are going to be 10 years from now, 5 years from now. My bias, of course, I'm an environmentalist, and I think environmental regulations are going to become more and more robust, and the cost of fossil fuel burning is going to rise faster than the cost of electricity, where we're building more and more wind turbines. But that's my bias, and I have to admit it. So this is what you have to think about when you're trying to decide, can my family afford to make this switch? Generally speaking, if you have oil heat, you're going to be saving money by switching to a heat pump. If you have gas, you may or may not. If you have propane, you certainly are going to. If you have electric resistance, you certainly are going to. So now we're going to jump into design stuff. How many people have ductwork in your house? Do you have a hot air furnace, or do you have air conditioning? Yeah, a lot of people. So if you have ductwork, this is going to be a fairly easy switch for you, because your heat is still going to come out of that ductwork. It's just going to go into the ductwork with a heat pump instead of a combustion machine. Of course, the ductwork, you need to look at it and make sure that it was appropriate. And particularly if your ductwork is only for your central air conditioning, there are some ductwork that will work better than others, and it needs to be taken a look at by a professional. people do not have any ductwork in your house? A couple people. Okay, great. So yeah, obviously you're not going to be able to do a centrally ducted thing unless you build ductwork, which would be expensive. But the ductless units and also mini ducted systems can be the answer to your heating and cooling needs. You can have a single head that serves a large open area. You can have several zones. And a mini ducted head can serve several adjacent small rooms. It's always a problem with small rooms because the heat pumps don't go down to very small sizes, and you don't want to have a heat pump that has too much capacity for the room. So let's look at a couple examples. Here we've got a 2-bedroom, and you could have just one large heat pump head serving the whole house. And this might be perfectly fine for a partial displacement of a fossil fuel heat, where you've got, the fossil fuel coming on, for backup when you need it. Or if you're used to heating with a wood stove. This is just like heating with a wood stove. Your living room and dining room and kitchen are nice and toasty. Your bedrooms are always cold in the winter, but, you make do. And this actually would be fairly efficient for cooling the whole home. The bedrooms would definitely be warmer in summer, but they would be dehumidified. And so the warmth would be much more tolerable and perhaps easily offset with a ceiling fan, say. The thing I want to warn you against is too many heads in too small space. In summer, you're going to end up feeling cold and clammy because that overcapacity is going to cool the house down quickly, and it's going to be like, we got to stop because it's getting too cold. But we didn't finish our dehumidification cycle. Well, forget the dehumidification, we're going to shut down anyway. You're going to have cold and clammy, not good. In the winter, you're going to have on-off cycling because it's going to, again, we got warm, we got to shut down. Oh, I got too warm. And that on-off is where the heat pump really loses its efficiency. The efficiency of a heat pump is they're designed to run like a bicycle, coasting on a flat plane. You have to do very little, you're in high gear and you're just very little and the bicycle just moves. So that's what a heat pump likes to do, is be very steady. You don't want to put too many heads in. So what do you do about these small bedrooms where that's just too much capacity? That's cold, clammy bedrooms in summer and cycling on and off in the winter. You can put in a little mini duct, and it can be a ceiling cassette. It could be ducted through the ceiling. It could be ducted even through the basement potentially. And you would be spreading the capacity of that one head between the two small rooms. You could even duct it into the bathroom. And then you have one unit in the living room, kitchen, dining room, which is plenty, for that space in this instance. You could have two separate condensers if you wanted to, or you could connect them. The heads can be up to 150 feet from the condenser. That's definitely something to consider. We, Green Energy Consumer Alliance, are partnering with Abode Energy Management to bring you technical assistance, more technical advice than I can give. If you tell me I've got a 6-inch type of ductwork, I'll scratch my head and say, I'll call Abode and say, what about this question? And you can get 1-hour consultations with them, or 45-minute consultations with them. They do a great job, and they do energy efficiency for the state of Massachusetts, for the state of Connecticut, for state of Rhode Island. So highly skilled. We have created, with their help, an online portal of trusted heat pump installers. You can access that list for free through our website. They do independent quote comparison reports, which are fantastic consumer tools that really allow you to drill down into these technical quotes in a way you and I can't do from our own knowledge base, but they make it easy to understand. And they offer a 50% discount when you come through our website. And you can do the virtual consultations with them, which is really excellent if you have, especially if you have technical questions. Here is an example of the quote comparison report. It's a 3-page report, up to 3 different vendors, side-by-side comparisons, different metrics. People have told me this was a game changer. When I saw that report, I received these quotes. I didn't understand the difference between them. They looked all the same to me. But when I looked at the quote comparison report, I immediately could tell how one was stronger in this way, another was stronger in this way, and it was clear to me which one I wanted. If you like this webinar presentation, we do lots of them, and you can always find them at consumers.org events. And we are a nonprofit. We welcome your donations. And I'm happy to take your questions after Dale speaks and via phone or email afterwards. Dan will come on.
Thanks, Lee. I will be very brief because I know you really want to talk with her. I bought a system in 2016. I bought my home here in Plymouth in 2016. I bought the 2 heat pumps in December, and I also bought the heat pump hot water heater. And if I went through her presentation and went back, I would love to have had a consultant helping me make choices through that system. So I would say, if you go through with this, do consider having the consultancy helping you understand what your various quotes are. I have an oil furnace. I didn't want to use the oil furnace. That was the simple motivation. I didn't want to use fossil fuels if I could get away with it. I have a 14,000 square foot home. So at the time, I wouldn't say I was an early adopter, but the incentive structure now is very different, more advantageous now because of current legislation. It was modest then, but still useful to have. The company that I ended up with, Endless Energy, I'll say positive things about them. At the time, they were hesitant to encourage me to use a duct. I have a ductwork from the furnace. They were hesitant to have me put in a ductless system, or a ductful system, to use the duct. Ducted, thank you very much. In part because, like many contractors at the time, and still some do, they will say to you, you're going to need this when it's really cold. You're going to need to have a backup system when it's really cold. And you used the temperature, I think, of 30 degrees earlier, so that's probably something that I heard. But I want to tell you now, before I lose my train of thought, since this is not a prepared speech, I want you to know that when it was freezing cold earlier this year, and I mean below 0 freezing cold earlier this year, I had my 2 heads working, one in the main living room and one in the back bedroom. If I had had a different design, I'd have the mini duct between 2 bedrooms, but I don't like a cold room, so it was okay with me to not have it in my particular room. I used it once. I used the furnace once, and that's because the temperature was on the order of 15 below, and I was more concerned about my water pipes in the basement of the house. Even though the temperature in the basement was 40 degrees. I thought, I don't want to take a gamble with my system to let the water pipes get frozen and have to go that route, and I used it once. So for the entire winter, one time. Here's what I thought you'd probably most like to hear. When I bought the system in December of 16, I wasn't living in the house full time. I started living in the house full time when I retired in September of 17. So I started using the system routinely because I was thinking I had to. Again, from what the installers were telling me, you probably want to do this. So from, trying to find my cheat sheet, but I put it someplace else. I bought 720 gallons of oil between November of 16 and February of 18. It's now 23, and I bought gallons of oil since then with that use of backup only. 720 gallons over a 15-month period, and I didn't use it all. For 3 years, I used it so infrequently, I had a tank that was more than half full of oil. And then I was talking with a contractor about another need I had, and he was saying, you probably want to burn that so it doesn't coagulate at the bottom and become something that would be difficult for your furnace system if you ever use it. So that particular season, I used it more frequently. That was last year. But this year, during the entire cold, just the one time, I really didn't need to use it then. So my motivation originally was to stop using fossil fuels. That I feel like I've done in spades. It's been a very good investment. I had the 2 units. I've had problems with one of the units. It took a while to get that unit fixed, but it took them so many efforts to get it fixed, they replaced it for free. So Endless Energy is the outfit that I work with. I know that Linda has worked with them on a quote basis for some work here in the town, so I encourage you to think about that as a particular vendor. And still, I would get 2 and 3 quotes, and I would use the consultant. If I had it to do over again, I would put in the ducted system. If that wasn't an option, I would consider getting the floor unit, which I could have used in my particular configuration, because the one head in the main living room is actually over an open stairwell, so I have to use a special ladder and support in order to get up to it to do any kind of cleaning and any kind of repair work, which is what they found when they came to do the work. So I would definitely look at what your options are for how you would use the ducted system or heads, the ceiling system, and so on, because those are advantages that the company was hesitant to describe because they probably weren't as technologically as sophisticated at the time. And what else should I tell you? I did have to have electric upgrade for the system when I had it installed, so that was just one part of the price tag for me, and there was no incentive, there was no rebate for that at the time, even though you saw that there is now with the federal system. And if you really want to talk to me about anything that I've said, feel free to ask me questions, but as soon as Lori catches her breath, you can talk with her about the very things that you have in mind. So, okay, Glenn?
Yes, thank you, Dale.
Sure.
So helpful. So I'd like to open it up for questions now, either questions for Dale or questions for Lori.
I have a question for Dale.
Okay.
Did you say, Dale,
Yes, please, go ahead.
did you say your house was 14,000 square?
1,400.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I
Trade
read.
1,400.
I heard that too, 14,000. Wow. Walmart.
Math it up.
All right.
1,400.
And then how long did it take that company to diagnose and troubleshoot and then decide they were going to replace one of your key systems? What is the span of time for all that to happen?
Well, since you asked, I called in January to say that the machine was putting out a harmonics sound that was clearly not just the air moving. So when if you get a head system, it's gonna be like having air move through your house like a fan is pushing. You shouldn't hear any kind of mechanical motor, you shouldn't hear any drum moving, but I was getting a fairly high-pitched harmonic. I would say most any business would have responded the same way they did. They wanted to come in and convince me that there was really no sound. However, the young installers, they noticed right off the bat that there's a sound that they're not accustomed to. So this dragged on, and I will tell you it took 6 months, but I was living with the sound because they had a couple of different crews come out. They figured that it was probably, there's a housing that, it's a cylinder that rotates the pump, and it has a pump rotation that disperses the air. But again, it was really clear that that wasn't where the sound was coming from. The products are Fujitsu. They had the Fujitsu rep come to the house, and he tried to tell me and everybody else that that's probably not what I'm hearing. And eventually I contacted the owner, and the next week it was all done. because they were probably trying to save money for the business. The problem for them was that their shop was in Marlboro, and the service charge for one visit is $150. So they were losing money because they came out 5 times with 2 and 3 different contractors along the way. And so finally, the shop foreman said, "You get the whole thing free. We'll just do it." But I had to still nudge the owner to get them to do that.
Did anybody come in with a sound meter just to measure the sound that you were hearing?
Well, I had it on my video phone.
Yeah.
I used my smartphone and I sent it to them, and
That's all they have to do, is come in with a sound meter and just measure it.
they could have done that, and they didn't. So it was kind of annoying. I looked at the sound in the background for quite a while, and once it was replaced, it's just a little bit of air. So, hear that Endless was trying to do less than they could have done, but they came through, and I'm satisfied with that. And I was asked the question as I was walking back, how do I get my hot water? So it's the heat pump hot water heater that I also had installed with the system. And I would also say that I put it on the Massey heat loan. So that loan is up in January, and no interest rate for that system that I put in. I also put in a solar array at the same time, different contractor, different pricing and so on. And that's, my energy use is covered most of the year by the solar array. So I paid, I think in my electric bill last year was $26. And I get money back from the solar array system that pays for the system that I'm paying for the many splits of water. So it can be folded in on itself under certain circumstances, not 14,000 square feet.
Other questions for?
You mentioned cleaning and maintenance. What's involved?
You can do it yourself. Once a year, this company would come out, and they often, and I don't use it. But the air conditioning and the heat and out of the one unit is, to the novice, it's kind of remarkable. It's very nice. It's very nice to have.
Yes.
This is for Bowie. We've heard from our contractor who actually installs heat pumps that, if I'm paraphrasing him correctly, at a certain temperature, when it gets colder, actual oil becomes a better alternative, and if it goes below that, then I might have it backwards. If it goes below that, then natural gas is cheaper than operating heat pumps.
Well,
I think it's about 25 degrees, because I have a forced-out water by oil, but I bought 2 Mitsubishi heat pumps about the same time you did, and I had about the same size house. And that was the question I had. At what point do I lose efficiency when it gets cold outside? To the point where the oil is better than, and they said about 25 degrees.
that's, I mean, you could make some ballpark, but it's highly variable depending on what's the price of oil, what's the price of electricity. If you own your own solar panels, that electricity is going to be less expensive to use all winter long. Or if you have a really great rate from your municipal electricity company. You know, if you have crazy, you know, prices like this winter, then it may be that you want to switch over to your fossil fuel even.
Yeah, it depends on the house construction too. You want to have that energy on first and do whatever they tell you to do.
Exactly, yeah, as much as you can.
Oh, but you said this webinar is going to be on the website. Are these slides going to be on the website too?
We didn't record tonight for putting on our website, but on our YouTube channel, you'll see a presentation very similar to this.
Okay. I do want to go, based on what they asked, I want to go back to those slides where you showed
The operating costs?
Yeah, and I want to
I'll
study
flip
those a
back to
little bit
that.
more at home, because I didn't know if
I can share my slides.
Yes, this will be recorded, the
Okay.
library is recording it, so it will be on the library website within a week or so.
With the slide.
Yeah, so I don't know how visible.
Okay,
the
because I
slides
love that, like, I want to study that more at home,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, so with a lower electric rate and then with a high electric rate. I mean, in this instance, the oil is cost competitive the whole winter long in this particular instance. But you have to look at the key and actually think about, okay, how does the key relate to what I actually paid? And I actually have, this chart was created for us by Abode, and I can change the key, and, you know, if you give me your costs and your efficiency of your equipment that you're intending to purchase, I can plug all those in and come up with a number. I hate to say that in public because I don't want to do it for everybody, but I'll do it for the next couple of people who ask me. But, you know, when the electric rate is low, then the oil does not get cost competitive with the air source heat pump until about 15 degrees Fahrenheit in this instance. So efficiency of the machine, you want to get a cold climate heat pump, one that has what we call an insignificant capacity drop. So capacity has to do with the efficiency that it's operating at, and with the older models, you have a highly significant capacity drop in low temperatures. But in cold climate heat pumps, you have a low capacity drop as the temperature gets colder, and they still function fairly well. Question?
The federal rebates that are available, are supposed to be available in November or later, that's this inflation reduction on the sheet here.
Yes.
And I guess the question is, do you contemplate those will be retroactive?
No, we do not expect the Inflation Reduction Act rebates to be retroactive. There's a slim possibility that they might be. They haven't slammed the door on that, but they have kind of warned us against anything like that. So yeah, these are the details on the two rebates that are coming possibly or certainly soon coming.
So would you advise people to wait until the rebate schedule was published before they went ahead to procure a heat pump if they wanted to take advantage of it?
Yes, in general, if your heating system, your existing fossil fuel system, is not in need of repair and you know, doesn't need to be replaced right away, then I think it'd be efficacious to wait. Now, if you have electric baseboard heat, jump on a heat pump right now because the amount you're going to be saving is, you know, in that waiting period will make up for the incentive that you're going to be paid. The savings will be so great. If you're heating with propane, you might want to jump on it right away because the savings are going to be so great. But with oil, even with oil, you might want to wait. You know, if you have efficient equipment now, certainly if you have gas equipment, certainly if you have high efficiency gas equipment, then you know, sit back and see what the rebates bring and do your numbers after those come.
True that the town of Plymouth buys clean wind energy from Texas, and therefore the people who can install the heat pump can feed it with green energy.
Yes, there are programs where you can buy clean energy now. You can buy 100% clean energy. I don't know what the Plymouth program is.
Go ahead, yeah.
We do have that.
Do you know the source of the green electricity?
The name of the company is escaping, but I believe it is Texas.
It's Dynergy, and they have, the town of Plymouth buys wind energy from Texas.
Okay.
So that's where, if you sign up with Plymouth's municipal aggregation for your electric bill, which most people are on in Plymouth, those some aren't. If they opted to go with another supplier, we get automatically put into an energy mix that is equivalent to what you would get from Eversource, which is some clean and some fossil fuel, like Eversource's standard mix. But then for like less than 50 cents a month, typically, you can upgrade to 100% green. And I believe in the fall, our current 3-year contract ends in October of 2023, and we'll start another contract. I believe in the fall, it will all be 100% clean.
That's what I understand about.
And they're buying SRECs, solar renewable, I don't know what it's called,
Energy credits.
from Texas. So all those wind turbines down there, we're getting benefits from up here.
So God bless Texas,
Very
and
good.
what will we do without Texas?
I'll talk to you offline about our criticisms of the Texas wind industry. But we can set that aside for now. Question? Good.
No, you're done.
Do the manufacturers of the heat pumps produce the graphs that show the efficiency of producing the required heat at different temperatures? Like similar to this?
I am not sure I'm sure they have data.
Yeah, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
is it available to us, I guess?
Yes, I believe it is, if you drill down. But I'll tell you another thing. A better source, I think, is called neep.org, neep.org. Do I have them on my slides anywhere? I don't think so. NEEP is Northeast Energy Efficiency, something. Anyway, there are these entities all around the nation, and this is the one for the Northeast. It's recognized by the federal government as a kind of a think tank on energy issues, a research hub. And they have a heat pump comparison tool, very easy to use. You can put in the exact model number if you want to, or you can say, I'm looking for something that's ducted that will produce 48,000 BTUs. Tell me all the things that meet that criteria. And you'll get a lot of data. You can print out a data sheet for every model that you're looking at and see what's their capacity at 48 degrees, what's their capacity at 15 degrees, what's their capacity at -5. And that way you can see how much of a capacity drop there is. And what you're looking at is there's a data point called coefficient of performance, and that's how much energy you're getting out for how much you're putting in. And we say the heat pump is 2 to 3 times more efficient than electric baseboard. So electric baseboard might have a coefficient of performance of 90%, something like that. A heat pump has a coefficient of performance of 200%, 300%. You put in 1 unit of electricity and you translate that into BTUs, and you get 3 times that many BTUs coming out of it. And at 50 degrees, you might get 4 times as much BTUs as you're putting into it. So that use of refrigerant and just pumping it back and forth between one place and another is really a game changer. More questions here?
I was hoping to hear more about geothermal groundwater-based systems. Can you address that at all? I imagine that there might be environmental impacts with groundwater systems that are not present in air systems. And I want to know if you think that's true. And I'm interested in maybe, what sort of water flow rate you need to run an average size house. I understand you need enough land to put a dedicated well in. And if there's any data on how far a well would have to be from a water supply well to make sure there's no impact on a water supply well. Do you have any?
I'm afraid I'm out of my depth, so to speak, on ground source heat pumps. But I do recommend the Mass Clean Energy Center has good information on ground source. Again, there's fewer installers, so it's a longer time lag to get somebody to come to the house.
But the geothermal is more expensive expensive usually.
Yes, yes, it's definitely more expensive to drill a well and pipe all that stuff than it is to simply put one box outside and one box inside.
And you have to have a dedicated well for that, do you? That's a
Yeah,
question, not
yeah.
stating.
Yes, yes, yeah. Back here.
The thing to keep in mind in regard to that question is, number one, if you go down 10 feet and the temperature for this part of the country stays the same all year long, it's around 50-something degrees versus, and the other thing is, water has the highest heat capacity of just about any compound. And so the amount of heat available in water versus air, there's just no comparison. And you're getting that heat out of something that's at, say, 55 degrees versus when it gets down to 20 degrees in air.
Right, exactly, yeah, no, the ground source is way more efficient, that's more like 400 to 500% efficient. And you can have a horizontal loop, with a relatively shallow bed versus a really deep well, both exist.
Are you guys, sorry, I just want to ask on that, you're talking about ground source geothermal, then you also said it was water source, but you guys are talking about water in the ground, like?
Yeah, two different things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the ground source can have a water loop. It can also have some other type of material, glycol maybe, I think. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Again, I'm out of my depth on that. But then what we said was the air to water heat pumps is where you might have radiant flooring. Or if you're building a new house, certainly air to water might be an idea. But that's where you're taking heat out of the air, or you could do a geothermal with a water distribution system. But that's, you'd be taking the heat from somewhere, either from the ground or from the air, and you'd be putting it into a water tank. And then you'd be running that water around your radiators. That's a air to water heat pump or a hydronic heat pump, which is separate from a ground source heat pump, which might use water in capturing the heat. Capturing the heat, distributing the heat. Any other questions?
I have a comment about this heat load and BTUs and all of that. It is so complicated and confusing for us who are trying to just say, we want to upgrade our heating system. I do recommend the Abode Energy Systems. For $150 fee, you'll get an hour of consulting with them, and for $75 through Green Energy Consumer Alliance, you can email them 3 quotes, and they put it into their analytical tool, and they give you a report. And so you can see, like, I was for a nonprofit here in Plymouth that has a building that has an addition, and it's sort of a complicated building, but I found they were very helpful because I don't understand that stuff. I look at those things and I go, I don't know, is that telling me it's good or it's bad? I mean, and you find a lot of the installers don't know all of that extra information, and so they're not all, until we get more experience out there, especially in southeastern Massachusetts. That's why, Endless Energy is in Marlborough, but they do come out here, and they do have a local account rep who lives in Plymouth, so he's the one who actually came out and looked at our building. So, there just isn't tons of expertise out there. Your installer knows how to install it, but does he know all these nuanced questions that you have? So Abode is very helpful there. And also, other places like Mass Clean Energy, so you feel a little more secure. On the other hand, we had a heat pump put in our house. We have about 1,500 square feet. We had a ducted system, so they just simply came out and they did the installation in one day. They took the air conditioning unit off the pad that it was sitting on. They put in a new pad. They put the heat pump there, connected it up, and put in a new thermostat. And we were we were up and running. I mean, it did take a while, they fiddled with the turnover, temperature, and some of the stuff. But now it just, no issues.
You had one more question.
Oh, yes, okay.
What I
Yes.
found locally is when all this started happening, the IRA Act is definitely not gonna happen until November. But I was asking all the contractors if they knew anything about it, and they were coming up totally empty. But most of the local people, they're air conditioning installers. So when you start talking heat pumps, they really don't know what they're talking about. So I started looking at the Canadian company, because they're installing these heat pumps in Canada. So our environment's much closer to that.
Yeah, Mass Save is doing a big push to upgrade the training required for all the heat pump installers. For many years, they had a certified air conditioner installer program. And, you know, they had to go through certain trainings, et cetera, to be able to submit the rebates. And now they're requiring, you know, new trainings for the heat pump installers. But there is still a big learning curve. And if somebody tells you, we can't do that, it probably is because they don't have that particular certification, but another company could do it because they are trained to do it. So.
Yeah, like in Massachusetts here, what air conditioning, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
Right,
6 months, 8 months.
right. Yeah, it's a different kettle of fish than heat pumps, yeah. Did you have a question?
Can you put a humidifier onto the system? That would
I don't know about how a humidifier would connect to a heat pump, yeah.
If you have a ducted system and you have a humidifier, I mean, we had one in our ducted system and it's still, it's just connected, it works, it's a separate unit.
Yes.
Great, so it is possible.
Thanks. I saw something that said you have a heat pump water heater and a solar water heater. And so I'm curious, like, you know, it's my mother. At her house, we'd like to get rid of the oil, add solar, but then do heat pumps. But we're always wondering, then, well, how do you do the hot water? But so is
Yeah, so
if
you
use
could.
solar. Actually, if you use solar, do you have to get a solar?
No, you could get a heat pump water heater, an electric.
I mean, what? Okay, heat water.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can, there are two types of solar panels. One makes electricity and one heats, usually glycol.
Oh.
And then runs that glycol through a big tank. Usually it's a bigger tank than your standard water tank. So you can have solar hot water, or you could have electric hot water.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And then I have another question. Does anyone know of any loans to remove the oil tank, like totally remove your whole oil system? I mean, 'cause
What was
that's,
the question?
Loans to remove the oil tank.
I haven't seen that.
No, that might be something that has to be borne out of pocket. But, you know, if your cost for your heat system is paid for by the loan, then that frees up your capital for doing and it may be that you could wrap that into the heat loan.
When I bought my system, you could not.
Okay.
And it was an expensive gesture, but I also found that my furnace was less than 10 years old. So it still had a good life to it, which is another reason why they were saying, just keep the system as the backup.
okay. Yeah, hers works fine, so keep it, but.
Well, working fine is one thing, but if it has a long life to it, where it's gonna work fine is what you really want.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And when I mentioned that I bought 100 gallons as my lean-to, my reserve, that'll last, it's already lasted me one full season, and it probably won't be touched until the end of next season. So, I know I probably spent more money on electricity during the cold snap for the efficiency of that unit. Again, for me, the motivation was using that electricity that was provided to the aggregate source was still far less burdensome as a CO2 source. So that for me was part of the justification. If I spent a little bit more money there, I've saved plenty in other.
You wanted to breathe the cleaner air, right?
Everywhere, all the time.
So I think let's have the drawing, the door prize now, and then Lily has kindly said she'll be available in the back, and Dale as well, if you want to talk to them afterwards. And so, do you want to draw a name out here? Just. Okay. Dan Sheehan. Is he here? Great. Come see me after. We're all set. So thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers. And I wish you good luck. It's not easy. It's worth it.